This year was very, very different because several very, very important people passed away. And I thought it was something truly beautiful. It unto itself, it was a work of art. It was a work of artistry. But the thing that was so powerful about it was the grief was real. When you saw
Yes.
Billy Crystal get up on stage and talk about one of his best friends, someone who made him a movie star, and someone who was a tireless champion of the LGBT community, his grief was real. You could hear his voice catch in places. When all those actors walked
Yes.
out on stage together, some of them, Will Wheaton and Jerry O'Connell, who worked with him when they were little kids,
Right.
others, Carol Kane, Demi Moore, major stars, all of them standing there. And it was just this sort of, this is what he did. You care about these people because of what he did. And that is a powerful, powerful statement about legacy.
Alrighty, everyone. If it's Friday, it's time for another episode of Entertainment Exposed right here on Left of Straight Podcast with always my handsome co-host. It's Rented Lips today, Mr. David Reddish.
Hello.
How are you, David?
I'm doing well. It is a scorcher today in Los Angeles. It is 100 degrees in March.
That's what I hear.
If this carries on, I mean, we're all going to be wearing loincloths and sheltering in place all summer. Which, I don't know. I don't have a problem walking around with my dong out, but a lot of people object to this for some reason. So,
Yeah, how rude. How rude they object to things like that. I'm telling, it's simply artwork, right? It's artwork in motion.
yes,
There you go.
There you go. Art in motion.
Yeah, wacky Ohio. I mean, we talk about weather every week. I had 70 degrees on Sunday. Monday, I woke up to rain and 60s. Monday at 4, there was a sleetish rain. And at 7 o'clock, I had 2 inches of snow on the ground again. So
Oh my goodness.
now it's still patchy snow and 32 today. So crazy stuff. But
crazy weather in the Midwest.
Arrived Oscar weekend. I need to hear all about your party. We weren't too far off on some things, but tell me about the Oscar of it all.
Well, I thought the show was terrific this year. It was very fun, even if the set looked like a sushi restaurant for some reason. It was like Benihana at the Oscars. But I thought the speeches were terrific. I was generally quite pleased, or at least accepting of the winners. I thought Amy Madigan winning was fantastic. We've talked about her on the show. I think that's the performance of the year. Plus it's a horror film, and older actresses over 60, horror films, they don't always get the kind of attention they deserve. So props to Ms. Madigan. Sean Penn wasn't there to collect his Oscar because reasons, I guess. There were some fine musical performances. Misty Copeland coming out of retirement to do ballet right in front of Timothée Chalamet during the big Sinners musical number. Timmy looked, there were a few digs at him, and he looked a little embarrassed the entire time. And I noticed there were not as many cutaways to him this year as there have been in past years where he's nominated, and it seems like everybody's loving on him. So maybe this is Hollywood sending him some kind of message. I don't know. When it comes to the Oscar pool of it all, I lost at my Oscar party by 1 point. It was a big party. And I thought Chalamet was going to pull out Best Actor because his comments about ballet and opera came the day before voting closed. And my thinking was most voters would have already voted. So if he had the momentum, it really wasn't going to diminish that. I think that will probably be what the historical narrative becomes. But you heard it here first, folks. I think he was always losing. I think people love Michael B. Jordan. I think people saw him, for all the reasons we talked about last week, as a better choice. Like, it was a great point in his career. He is a major star. It's good to recognize him in a hit film. There were all kinds of good reasons why. Jordan is a terrific actor. He's a beautiful man, obviously. I loved his tuxedo with the Nehru collar, and his speech was fabulous. So I'm willing to lose the Oscar pool if that's the one I was wrong about. I did call all the other major awards, including Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Picture. To me, I think the most interesting part of the ceremony was the memorial. And that, of course, is something that always happens. That's always been part of the show. This year was very, very different because several very, very important people passed away. And I thought it was something truly beautiful. It unto itself, it was a work of art. It was a work of artistry. But the thing that was so powerful about it was the grief was real. When you saw Billy Crystal get up on stage and talk about one of his best friends, someone who made him a movie star, and someone who was a tireless champion of the LGBT community, his grief was real. You could hear his voice catch in places. When all those actors walked out on stage together, some of them, Will Wheaton and Jerry O'Connell, who worked with him when they were little kids, others, Carol Kane, Demi Moore, major stars, all of them standing there. And it was just this sort of, this is what he did. You care about these people because of what he did. And that is a powerful, powerful statement about legacy. Rachel McAdams, who, the gays love because Regina George and Mean Girls, coming out and delivering a beautiful speech about Diane Keaton, who was an icon, who was somebody that everyone just kind of loved. And hearing her voice catch, because this was a real friend and it was someone she genuinely cared about. And it was a personal loss to her as much as it was, a loss to everybody else. And of course, Barbra Streisand talking about Robert Redford. There have been rumors about her health for some time, that she has a lot of mobility issues, and we saw that on full display, but she wasn't scared to show that in the name of honoring her friend, who was a force in the filmmaking business and who created Sundance, and how many great queer films and filmmakers and performers came out of Sundance in the 90s and early 2000s. I mean, you're talking about someone with a huge contribution to queer cinema. Whether that was his intention or not, he deserves recognition for that. It was powerful. And there were a lot of people weeping in the room. I was getting over food poisoning, so I did not drink at this year's Oscar ceremony. Otherwise, I promise you, I would have been bawling right alongside everybody else. There was Kleenex going around the room. It was as memorable as anything at the show. And I think that alone was worth the watch to me. I mean, what are your thoughts? I'm talking about this too much.
No, I'm 100% with you. I did not do a pool. We did bingo, Oscar bingo.
Yeah.
So we all were given bingo cards from my friend, and mine was wacky, but I did have him coming out as the Amy Madigan wig. That was one of my little corners, everything. That was on my card. Timothy Chalamet part was on my card. I had probably 7 squares filled out from my card, but it was a lot of fun for that. I do believe that it was one of the better as far as speeches go. They cut off the one person by lowering the mic and let it back
so
on.
Bizarre.
And even Conan mentioned that. And then there was one other one that lost their mic, and that was it. Otherwise, I thought they were very respectful in their speeches for time, and I thought the speeches were very well done. So I agree 100%. And there wasn't a lot of surprises besides the in memoriam, and they did that amazing. As you said, thank you to Barbara for not worrying about someone walking around, for using that voice for as short a time as it was and being vulnerable. I mean, she's not a person to show vulnerability in front of anyone.
Yeah.
So she was out there. I thought that was a beautiful segment. We talked about it in a previous episode. My cousin actually house set for Rab Reiner when he filmed Harry Met Sally, Billy Crystal. I know how close they were. And as you said, I don't think people know until they're reminded how much him and Michelle worked for Prop 8 in California.
Yeah.
And I love that was brought up and memorialized there. So, I just thought overall, it's going to be really interesting. I mean, they talked about it. There's only 2 years left on ABC. In 2 years will be the 100th anniversary of the Oscars. ABC is keeping that little nugget to themselves. And then it goes on to YouTube, right? So streaming platform. So I think the significance is going to be building toward this with Oscars. And I just thought it was very well done. I mean, Conan was very subdued overall. Had a couple of good digs at the president, but still subdued overall. And I thought it was just a very well done performance. I mean, timing wise, not too far over, maybe 12 minutes or so?
Not much. Over. As for the show itself, your point about the speeches getting cut off, that was something very, very annoying and frustrating to watch. And I felt bad for the people who were trying to give speeches. It also wasn't clear why they were cutting them off so abruptly. And it seemed like there were a lot of technical problems with the broadcast itself. The show was fine, but the actual technical broadcast, there were lots of sound problems. I think a cameraman tripped and fell at one point, and his camera you saw it sort of fly over the audience. There were some very strange cutaways. At the pre-show, Kirsten Dunst, her Chiron, the name placard said Kathy Bates as she was sort of, posing on the step and repeat.
Miss.
They cut that off real quick. I don't know if that's an ouch to Kirsten Dunst or to Kathy Bates. I'll let y'all decide. But as far as it going to YouTube, it will be interesting to see what the ceremony looks like. If it is still such a grand affair, if people still show up to it. My guess is they probably will. But yeah, the ratings were not great, but the ratings have been sort of on the downward trend. Now, the other thing is that last year, the Gaming Awards, which I believe only aired on YouTube, got more viewership than the Oscars. So it could be when the Oscars go to YouTube, more people will actually watch because they can more easily pause because
Right.
it's not going to be censored in terms of the speeches, because they can jump around a little bit faster. We'll see what happens. But
yeah, it will be streamed for free on YouTube, so everyone has access. So you're right. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. I believe numbers wise, it was down 9% to last year in overall viewership and 14% in the 25 to 49 category, which is what everyone's looking for these days. So yeah, it was down a bit, but like I said, I liked that there wasn't a lot of there was some great verbal bits by Kona, but not a lot of the audience interplay that sometimes annoys me and everything.
yeah.
Bits out in the audience. So very, very good. So overall, we did pretty well, my friend. I look back at our predictions and we were pretty darn close most of the way there.
Yeah.
What else is on your hot button this week?
Well, speaking of Timothée Chalamet, the Dune 3 trailer dropped yesterday, which sci-fi nerd that I am, I'm very, very excited. It's based on the novel Dune Messiah, which is the second in the Dune series. I have read it. It's a very different kind of story from Dune, but it picks up with all the same characters and moves the universe into some very interesting places. Robert Pattinson joins the cast as Scytale, who is a shapeshifter. I'm very excited to see what he does with the role. And of course, we're going to get a lot more with Zendaya and a lot more with Florence Pugh this time out as they sort of battle for control of the Empire. And as Timothée Chalamet's Paul faces the fact that he has not been a savior to the universe, he's kind of screwed it up even worse. So it's one of the most fascinating elements. And anyone who's read the books will tell you, you always think you know who to root for. And then Frank Herbert, the author, pulls the rug out and makes you take a step back and go, well, maybe heroes and villains, it's all depends on perspective. And it's not what's a hero in the moment is not necessarily a hero in the long run, or can be a villain in the long run. Raises lots of ethical questions, which are what make the saga so compelling. That and it's, those movies are just a visual knockout. So also Jason Momoa is back as Duncan Idaho. And if you're wondering how that's possible since he died in the first movie, check out part 3. There's a very good, very, very good explanation. And he does have a relationship with Anya Taylor-Joy's character. She's also joining the cast in a major role as Paul's younger sister, Alia, who is scary. She's scary. So check that out.
I was excited. I thought it was a great trailer. I mean, it's not till December, so you sometimes get a trimmed down trailer. This was like $240 or something. It was a nice size trailer. A lot of good plot points were brought out. Like you said, looks visually amazing. And I think it's going to be very well received. It looked fantastic.
I think so. I'm excited for it. I love that it's a grand epic, that it's grand science fiction, and that it proves you can be true to source material. You can make a sci-fi movie for teenagers and adults, and people will see it, and it will be great. You compare that with the more recent Star Wars movies, which I have many complaints about them, as we've sort of touched on this show in the past. But one of them is that they look like they were filmed on a soundstage. They don't look like they were filmed on location, whereas Dune was, and you can see the dust and the sand under people's fingernails and in their hair and in the camera lens, and it just feels real. It has a certain visceral quality to it that gives it a certain credibility and a certain gravity. I love that about the Dune films. I think Denis Villeneuve's a genius, and I know, from a business standpoint, this movie was not supposed to happen for a few years. I think the original target was something like 2028 or 2029. But Warner Brothers basically begged Chalamet and Denis Villeneuve come back and do it right away, and eventually they relented. So they're moving forward. Right. I promise this will not be the last Dune movie. There will be more, but we'll see how much further they get. And we could have that conversation another day.
I don't know if you saw it. It was very funny. Speaking of the realisticness of the set for Dune, but there was some showing this past weekend or something, some horror movie, and I honestly can't remember it, but they used blood cannons. They gave people different, like, whatever they're called, the little rain slickers or whatever.
Yeah,
And there was
punches.
actually blood cannons shooting out in
Gosh.
this live theater. And the joke was, so in Dune, are they going to do this with sand and have sand cannons out there? But I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was pretty a funny little story I read earlier. So that was kind of amazing. But yeah, I do. I mean, the realness of the set and the sets, you can't deny the difference of that between Star Wars. So very good point on that. One of the big things that happened right before the Oscars that was very near and dear to my heart and very sad is they canceled the reboot of Buffy
Knew this was
on
coming up.
Hulu.
I knew we were
And
going to talk
Hulu
about
was
this.
going to, and Sarah Michelle Gellar got in front of it and put it on her social media. She wanted to be the one to break the news to the fans. I thought was very classy and smart on her part. I'd love to hear what you heard about it. From what I heard, the initial filming of it did not have enough. Sarah Michelle Gellar was one of the complaints. There was a lot of issues with the pilot from what I heard, but I'm very sad to see that not going forward. And I'm wondering what your take is on that. What
You and a lot of other people. I guess I should preface all of this, all of what I'm about to say and reveal, because I have been doing some deep background on this. Everything I'm about to say and reveal, I don't have a dog in this fight. I was never a Buffy fan. I'm fairly ambivalent to the show when it was on. I know it showed a lot of 90s and early aughts kids. There can be gay people and it can be great, and you can't have female heroes and they can be great. And grant all of that it changed television and was great for the queer community in a lot of ways. I never could get into it. I've tried multiple times. It's not my sense of humor. And I think that's the biggest issue. Even though I love Sarah Michelle and I think she's a fantastic actress, my connection to her is from All Night Children, which she did before Buffy, because we're about the same age. She won an Emmy for that because she's freaking amazing, shows how good she actually was. But okay, so you're right about the Buffy cancellation. Sarah Michelle breaking the news to the public, sort of taking that, in stride, and also wanting to be the one. Like she has a certain, I think, protectiveness over Buffy and the character, obviously, for all the right reasons. And Chloe Zhao, who directed the pilot and was producing the revival, also was asked about this on the red carpet and gave some very, very sort of slippery answers about what was actually going on. She would not reveal too much other than to say she was really disappointed and it was very painful and there were reasons. So I went to the liberty of finding out as many of these reasons as I could.
I love it.
One thing Sarah Michelle said is she kept referring to a single executive at Disney Hulu. She would not name him. Both Deadline and The Hollywood Reporter have done a lot of digging, and they found out it's a guy named Craig Erwich, who is an executive at Disney, was the one that was constantly saying, I'm not a Buffy fan. I think this is stupid. I've never seen the show. And he sort of kept reminding them all that you're lucky we're even letting you do this because I think it's a bad idea and I think there's no audience for it. I think there's also, and to the point about Sarah Michelle revealing this, one of the big issues that came out of this was that Disney purposely asked them to wait until after the Oscars. They wanted to wait until after last weekend. They wanted to announce it on Monday because Sarah Michelle had a new movie coming out, Ready or Not 2. And Chloe was going to the Oscars where she was nominated for Best Director, so everyone knew she'd be on the red carpet with microphones shoved in her face. Disney did not want the two of them to have all these microphones and people asking about why is Buffy canceled, which is exactly what happened. And because of that, somebody leaked an early version. It is not the final version, but the early version of the pilot script. This is dated 2024. A guy who is some YouTube, he calls himself a movie pundit. Okay, yeah. Do you have a real job? Do you get paid to do it? Just saying, from those of us that do. Robert Meyer Burnett is his name. I have no real quarrel with him, but he posted the last page of the script and slammed the whole project, said it was a stupid idea, that it was a bad, compared it to Scooby-Doo, said it was not a reboot of Buffy. And then he also added the line that Buffy was created by a man. Get over it, deal with it, which seemed to be a dig at Chloe Zhao, Sarah Michelle, the producers and the director, and then Nora and Lilia Zuckerman, who are two respected television writers. They worked on a show called Poker Face, very, very good program on Peacock. They were hired to write the pilot script. He seemed to be implying that all these women were hired because they were women, because it's a story about a woman, not because they were actually qualified to write television or understand the genre. That is, you can say that about Chloe Zhao, or you can say that about the Zuckermans, but you should not say that in the context of it's a woman, so, these are women, so they absolutely can't know. And oh my gosh, we're discriminating against men. That is stupid, and it totally tips his hand in terms of what his agenda is and what kind of person he is. So there's all of that. I don't know. The script did leak out, and I think maybe this was the fact that it was the early version of the script, which only had Buffy in the final scene. That was the only time she was going to appear, and the rest of the story was about a new group of kids at Sunnydale High who think Buffy is kind of a myth, but they know about the vampires and they know about the Hellmouth and all of the crazy. It's about them sort of investigating, vampires in school, and it's very funny in the same way Buffy is, and was sort of geared towards kids of this younger generation, which I think a lot of older Buffy fans who have since read the script object to, but we could talk about the reasons for that in a second. And then the idea was Buffy was going to be sort of the last thing you see, and that she's not the same Buffy anymore, that something has changed about her. And to me, reading this, it seemed like the arc of the series, the trajectory of it was going to be Buffy finding her groove again and becoming sort of the leader of this young band of Slayer as much as she was in high school, right? The important things to say about this are that was not the final script. The script changed considerably. It was 30 minutes longer. They wanted a 2-hour pilot, so they added at least another 30 minutes, another 30 pages to the script. It was over 90 pages long. And that Buffy was actually a central character in the rewrite. Sarah Michelle was going to be in it a lot more. It was much more focusing on this is who Buffy is now, and these are these new kids, and they're going to join together to go forward on this adventure, which, makes sense to me. Now, what's interesting is the people who have seen the pilot, the word about it is that it still was not very good. They did do reshoots and have a re-edit of the pilot. Apparently, Disney was still not happy with it. I have read some criticism of Chloe Zhao that has nothing to do with her gender, but that she maybe was not, her sensibility did not necessarily lend itself to what Buffy needed for a revival continuation series. There are still criticisms of the writing, which, not having read the final script, I don't know. They say the pilot will never air. There was talk of, maybe they'll shop it to another studio, another network. Fox, Disney owns Buffy, and so they will never let it out. They're not going to give it over to the WB. A friend of mine was like, well, what about the WB? Could they put it out on HBO? And I said, well, if they sold it, but I don't think Disney is going to do that, especially since it's become this sort of flashpoint for controversy.
Yeah.
One thing that I did get from a friend of mine who did read the final script and said he thought it was actually very good and that it worked very, very well. One thing this source told me was the big sticking point was actually the number of episodes, that Hulu wanted 6 to 8 episodes and Chloe and Sarah Michelle wanted a full 18, as was the old Buffy. They did these full 18 episode arcs. Hulu did not want to fund that, given that the pilot is more expensive, that obviously Chloe and Sarah Michelle and the writers, it was going to be a much more expensive thing for them to do. And they saw it as an ongoing project, whereas I think Hulu maybe saw it as a limited series, a sort of limited mini series that they may or may not come back to in the future. I have not been able to confirm that within Disney or within Fox, but it is a potential sticking point. I'm not seeing that widely reported by Deadline or Hollywood Reporter or other spaces within the medium. What seems to be universal is there was a lot of bad blood between Sarah Michelle, Chloe Zhao, and people at Disney Hulu. And that ultimately was maybe why, even if the pilot was good or watchable, Disney did not want to move forward.
Very sad. I was a huge fan of the show, and I agree. It's like I've heard some of what you said. I haven't heard all of it. I think Sarah Michelle was probably a little reticent, and I think because Wolfpack didn't make it, and she was kind of in the same situation there where she was part of it, but not the lead of that. And so I'm sure that led up to being more involved in your final read through that you got. So yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff we don't know about. The whole original Josh of it all from the original series had a lot of iffy things back in the day. So who knows if there was a lot of asks that we didn't know about, because there was a lot of controversy with him after the fact.
There
course,
is.
right?
I do think there is an argument to be made that if Joss Whedon is not involved, though he's a reprehensible person in my view and wildly overrated as a writer,
Yes.
there is an argument to be made that because this was his baby, maybe you shouldn't do it without him involved. The other interesting thing, the discourse about this, Scott, that I find so interesting is that older fans generally, especially in vile places like Reddit, a lot of them that read this new script, which again is not the final script, bashed it because they wanted it to be about the original characters, not new young characters. And this opens up a whole interesting, I think, line of discourse about these long-awaited sequels, these legacy sequels, these revivals, everything from Star Wars to Scream to Star Trek to, I mean, everybody's doing the Ghostbusters. Everybody's doing it in some form or
Yeah.
other, right? Which is that these are movies that were aimed at, and shows that were aimed at teenagers and young adults and kids 30, 40 years ago, sometimes even longer than that. And those people feel a certain ownership over it, and they don't want it to be aimed at kids anymore. They want it to be aimed at them. So the idea that, one of the biggest criticisms of the Star Wars sequel trilogy is, oh, why wasn't it more about Luke and Leia and Han and the original characters? I don't care about these new characters. I don't think they're interesting. I think they're stupid. Get rid of them, like make it about the original characters. It's like, well,
Right.
Star Wars was always for kids. They're in their 60s. I mean, they can't do it the way they used to. And their stories have kind of been told. So is the better option to just not do more or not include them at all? Or do you include them just sort of passing the torch? Nobody wants to be reminded that they're getting old, which is something that I think subconsciously these sort of revivals do. It's also interesting, and this, by complete coincidence, I watched a film called I Saw the TV Glow on Saturday, right before this announcement broke, which is very much inspired by Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the fandom that sort of grew up around Buffy and the sort of youth culture of the 90s, Nickelodeon, the WB, Fox Kids, all the Power Rangers, all the things that were sort of aimed at us who were growing up in that era. And to me, the film got a lot of press because it's a queer metaphor, which is on the screen, and Justice Smith plays the lead, and he's extremely good in the film. But what struck me the most about it was part of the depression that the main character goes through is he keeps looking back at this show, which is clearly meant to be Buffy, right down to they use the same sort of font in the credits. He keeps looking at it and it's not fun anymore. It seems stupid and cheesy and cheap and lame, and he can't understand it anymore. And the movie,
Right.
on some level, is a statement about aging fans, people who grew up with a lot of media pointed in their direction, that fandom became maybe part of their identity, or they suffered some kind of arrested development because of it, and now they don't know what to do anymore because they recognize they are older. They cannot see these things with the same eyes that they once saw it. And so any attempt at a revival, any attempt at going back and looking at it again is just painful because they're not the same people. They think they want the same thing, but what they actually want is to be someone else, to be something else. I thought that was
Yeah.
very, very interesting to wake up then the next morning and see the Buffy reboot was dead, just coincidentally. And it made me think a lot about, well, are these long awaited sequels? We think they're a great idea, and they tend to make a lot of money when they first drop. Are they really a good idea? I don't know. What are your thoughts, Scott?
Well said. I agree with all that. I think we should leave those standing alone because I think you're exactly right, and that's a good way to button up that topic because I think, as you said, everyone is kind of has the nostalgia, right? Nostalgia is a powerful marketing tool. Especially now, nostalgia is a huge marketing
And I hate
tool.
that. I personally hate that so much.
Right. Yeah. I think you said it very well. I got one interesting, I thought was weird thing to talk about a little bit that I don't know if it caught your attention or not. But speaking of Peacock, NBC Universal is betting that a digital AI Andy Cohen
Yeah.
will help
God.
drive the Peacock users into the Bravoverse a little bit deeper. They are creating an AI generated version of Andy Cohen. It's going to tee up a lot of different things from Bravo shows. I mean, talking about the AI of it now and where they're worried about it's happening, they are putting together like 5,000 clips of different Bravo shows that can key it up into over 600 billion possibilities of talking about this. And then they're going to be adding stuff like games from Law and Order and Wolf Entertainment. And I mean, we talked about the scariness of AI, but how weird is that for a story? I thought that was very interesting.
I mean, no offense to any of his fans or to Andy Cohen personally, but if you're going to create an AI version of somebody, is Andy Cohen really where you want to start? Is he really
He
the
already
best candidate
seems
for
like an
this?
AI version of himself, I'm
Well,
telling you.
I mean, you said it, not me. But look, I have no affinity for Andy Cohen. I don't watch any of his shows. It seems like a strange choice, but it also signals that AI Andy Cohen is going to be a lot cheaper than actual Andy Cohen. And I think there's a feeling that the corporations, the corporate-owned media, they can sort of, well, we could have Howard Cosell do sports forever. We could have Walter Cronkite do the news forever, and it will just feel familiar, but it's not the same thing. And we're still in uncanny valley territory when it comes to these, the AI generated clips. They circulate on social media. I'm sure you've seen them. Everything from what if Grant Gustin would have starred in The Flash to what if this scene would have happened in The Wizard of Oz, and it would have been so satisfying. This is another one. It's like, you may think it's a good idea. I think it's really going to backfire in the long run. I think as someone who works in the media, as somebody who is an artist himself, it creeps me out that they're trying to do this. And it is sort of perplexing me. Andy Cohen, really? You want other people like Andy Cohen? This is how you're trying to attract viewers. Okay. Not Mariska Hargitay, not Jerry Orbach. Okay, fine. Andy Cohen. Have fun with that.
It's very weird. It's the lowest common denominator, I think, to get the AIs to Peacock. And I'm not sure. We'll have to see how it works out. But I'm afraid it's going to become a trend in other places. So we'll see what happens with it. That's all I really had that caught my interest this week. Anything else that you want to talk about before we go?
No, that's it. I will keep our viewers and listeners up to date on any new news that breaks out of the Buffy cancellation. My theory, everybody, is that the pilot will leak eventually. We will see what kind of state it is in once it hits the digital airwaves, but there you have it.
I agree. Next week, we're going to have a lot to talk about. There's a lot of discussion right now about Ryan Gosling's new flick and how much it costs, to whether it's going to be able to help Amazon or not. There's a lot of things in that. I thought it was an interesting story. We'll wait until after premieres this weekend, find out more about that. Next week, we'll talk about you going to your next con. You can give a little tease of that now. But let's go ahead and wrap it up by reminding everyone your social media for yourself and the David Reddish Show, and tease this con you'll be at next weekend.
Sure. You can find me on Instagram at The Gay Magneto, all one word. Or you can find my show on YouTube if you just search The David Reddish Show. I will be appearing at WonderCon 2026 at the Anaheim Convention Center at the end of the last weekend of the month, right? No, second to last weekend of the month, whatever it is. A week from Friday. How about that? Be there a week from Friday. I will be offering copies of my books and offering polite conversation about everything entertainment and politics related. So if you're there, come out and say hi. I'll be at the Prism Comics booth, which I believe is 1401, 4 o'clock Friday, 2 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday.
Fantastic. Guys, we appreciate you tuning in. Next week, I will have, if you like the scary movies, I just did an interview today with the lovely Danielle Nicolette, who was on The Flash for a lot of seasons. And she is her directorial debut for the All Black Network, ALLBLK Network, which is one of the flagships of the AMC blanket there. She's got a new thriller coming out, her first directorial debut. I'll talk about that next week. We appreciate you tuning in every week. Tell your friends. Be sure to hit that little subscribe button. We appreciate you. And that's Entertainment Exposed for this week. Have a great day, everyone. See you, David.
Bye.